Hey everybody, welcome to Jacob's Quest, and today I just finished watching episode 3 of The Last of Us, and yeah, this show remains amazing, remains great, but this episode specifically, I think, is going to prove to be, I don't know, somewhat of a turning point, maybe, or at least like a big test, I think, for several different pieces of the audience here. So let's break it down, obviously full spoilers. So yeah, episode 3, this episode, it was great. I really enjoyed it. But the first thing it does is that it very highly deviates from the game. Okay? And what I mean is that, show-wise, what they basically do is, instead of following Joel and Ellie getting to Bill's neighborhood and, playing out the way that the game plays out, instead we follow Bill and we rewind all the way back to the beginning, and we kind of, we fill in a couple more gaps of like exactly how everything went down. Joel even talks a little bit about how, like, basically everyone bought the stuff on Thursday and Friday, all the wheat and the flour and whatever else the contaminant might have been in, and then by Friday night and Saturday morning, the world was over, basically. So like it all happened very quickly, which a lot of people have pointed out. Like that first episode, they didn't have pancakes, they didn't have a birthday cake, so they managed to avoid getting infected, stuff like that, right? Anyways, but yeah, we're following Bill's point of view as his neighborhood is getting evacuated and he manages to hide, and he's like this extreme survivalist conspiracy guy. He's basically who, in the year 2023 today on Twitter, in our world, we would watch out for this guy, right? He would he would definitely be associated with certain kinds of people on the internet at this point. But in the year 2003, he's a survivalist and he hides in his bunker, and he is the last person in his neighborhood left alive. And basically we follow him throughout the years. We kind of skip to 3 years later, and he meets Frank, who in the video game we only ever hear about Frank. We never even hear his voice. I think we see a bunch of letters that Frank wrote at different points. We hear Bill talk about Frank, but Frank is very much like a background, character, right? I think we might see his... Do we see his body? I think we might see his body, because I think the idea is that in the video game he runs away from Bill at some point. Like they break up, he runs away, and then he gets bitten, and then when he gets bitten he ends up killing himself because he doesn't want to turn, right? And I think that's how it all plays out tragically in the video game. But this show, not only are we following Bill instead of Joel and Ellie for the 90% of the episode, that's not how it plays out at all. In the show, it's actually, of course they have their fights and stuff like that, but it shows like 5 years later, then 10 years later, then all the way to 2023, and basically it shows how like they lived this whole life together, really, 20 something years, right? Or just 20 years exactly, I guess. And then eventually Frank got sick and he was bedridden, and I don't know if it was some kind of cancer of some sort, but he was sick, and basically he decides that he just wants to end his life, and it's this really tragic thing, and everyone who's watching this episode starts crying here, and then surprisingly, and again way deviating from the games, Bill decides to also take the pills in his wine, and he's also ending his life. And so that way, when Joel and Ellie do finally get there at the end of the episode, they just have the supplies ready, and they left a note and some keys, and so they're able to just take what they need and leave. So there's not a lot of monster action in this episode. We do get like one small moment where Ellie is close up with a monster and then kills it, right? But as far as like the infected go, they're not very much in this episode. This was very much just about Bill and Frank and that whole tragedy and kind of living in this world and being a survivor, and how you have to live to survive here, so this is definitely gonna be, I think, the big test of like the audience who, like myself, played both the games and were really familiar with the source material, and we walk into this, and those first 2 episodes were 99% like hitting the same beats as the game, showing us exact scenes, almost exact dialogue that happened in the game. And then here comes this episode where it's like takes a left turn, where it's like, okay, we're switching it up on you, and this is like a test of like, can you handle this? You know what I mean? Because I think a lot of people were praising the show up to this point to where it was like, it's such an exact adaptation that it's like, like, this is perfect. It's doing everything exactly how it's supposed to happen. And then here we go, we're changing things. This is a big swing. And I will say, again, they're being very, very smart about how they're changing things, because before they were just doing some small things, some kind of large things, but they were always like in the background. They didn't actually change like the overall story of what's happening. And this episode still doesn't, because the big beats are that Joel and Ellie get to Bill's neighborhood, they get some supplies from Bill, they get in a truck, and now they're officially on their journey to go try and save Joel's brother. And like, you know what I mean? Like, so those things still do happen, but we're informed on this whole other section of the story that it's not exactly what happened in the game, but it is like so much more of like Bill and Frank are like a character, like they're not just these, well, Frank didn't even exist really. He didn't show up at all, and then Bill was there for that one small like 15-minute segment of the game, So yeah, just this is a test for people who play the game of like, I have not really seen the reactions out there, so I don't know if anyone is actually upset the fact that they changed so much. I'm sure some people are, but I can't imagine that it was that, this big controversy. But I don't know, everything's a controversy these days. Anyways, but this does kind of, moving forward, I think it is trying to tell us, the audience who have played the games, I think it's trying to tell us that like, hey, this is how far we're willing to go, and we might even be going farther. What if they change the end of the game? What if the ending actually is not the same? That would be, I think, the craziest thing. But yeah, they're definitely willing to take like these much bigger swings narratively, and like okay, we're drastically doing things in a different way, and some characters are going to have entirely different endings than they had before. So we know what's supposed to happen, or what originally happened, I guess. And so it feels like, I think everyone's mostly going to still be on board with the show doing this. And I think it's because it had those first 2 episodes of like kind of like a promise, like, okay, we know what's supposed to happen. We're not people who don't pay attention to the source material or don't care about the source material or something, because we've had shows like that. I think the Halo show was like an infamous example of like, they just don't care or something, right? Like, it's something about it was clear. I didn't watch the show, but I remember like that being a big complaint of like something in the Halo show. It's like, those people just don't care, they don't get it, they're not paying attention, kind of thing. So it feels like those first 2 episodes of this one was like a promise of like, we do get it, we did pay attention, so when we do change things, it's not because we're trying to like mess with stuff or something, like it's because we're trying to add things to it, and it feels like that's what this did, and they did a really, really great job with that. The other thing, of course, is that like, your general audiences who did not play the games, again, maybe a little bit of a test, a bit of like, hey, we're following entirely 2 different characters, and then by the end of this episode, those 2 characters are dead. So, you know what I mean? Like, I wonder how they're gonna react to the fact that like, hey, you followed these characters for an hour and then they died, and now we're gonna get back to the other characters that we were following in the show. So I don't know how that's gonna play with everyone. I didn't mind it at all, because I think it's because I know what's going to happen, or what what was going to happen. So it doesn't bother me that we didn't see Joel and Ellie all that much this episode. But yeah, just this show continues to impress. It continues to show that they care, and now something that the first 2 episodes did not show, it shows how far they're willing to change things. The risk, because I think this was somewhat of a risk in the sense of like, it's so easy, I say easy, like, maybe not easy is the right word. It seems like the obvious play to not change anything or not change things as much. And I think most people, if you ask them how do you do a good adaptation, they'd be like, don't change anything, you know, or try to change as little as possible, you know. So this is their first attempt to be like, all right guys, we're gonna change this, and it's like a whole trajectory of these characters, and they're gonna get a whole episode on themselves, you know, like. So anyways, the show is just, they're doing such a great job with this, you know. There's throwing surprises out there where I really didn't think there would be surprises, you know. Maybe some people will say I kind of wish there was more action or more scary parts this episode, which I'm sure moving forward there will be plenty. So yeah, I enjoyed this one. This was definitely an emotional one, gonna get a lot of tears on this one. Yeah, the show's doing great. They're doing a great job. All right, let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.